So thank you for coming out tonight. I appreciate it. I apologize if any of you tried to come this morning. I just returned like moments ago, literally, from Louisiana for a work trip. So my apologies if you tried to come this morning. Thank you for coming out tonight. So when you first got the email from Alice that we were going to be doing some greeter and usher training, you probably had one of three thoughts. One was either greeter training. Why do we need greeter training? The second option was probably greeter training. What's taken them so long to get this together? And the third thought that you might have had was greeter training. Didn't we do this like 2-3 years ago? And what happened with it? So when we started putting this together, really this is kind of a brainchild from Paul of a change that he envisions for the greeter and usher program. And so he put forth the vision, and then I ran with it and made it completely unrecognizable to him. So my apologies for that, Paul, but what I'd like to do is kind of talk a little bit about what I'd like to see Northwoods do. And so let me start out with a prayer. Let's start over there. Gracious and loving God, we thank you that you have brought us tonight, that we could have some time together, that we could spend these few moments together just learning about different ways that we can welcome others to your church. Lord, as we listen tonight, as we converse tonight, help us to remember that ultimately everything we do is to glorify you, and that ultimately we're welcoming our friends and our neighbors and strangers into your home and welcoming them into your family. Thank you, Lord. Amen. So let me start out by kind of giving you a little background. So I think you all know me. I'm Daniel Spencer, if you don't. I have been coming to church here at Northwoods since I started in January of 2009. And I thought I would start out by kind of telling you about my first experience at Northwoods. When I first came, I had talked about, I've told this story before, so my apologies if you've heard it, but when I first came, I had just moved to Houston. I had been raised in the church. I can't remember a time in my life that I didn't go to church. And so when I moved down here, that was a top priority for me, was to find a church. So much so that I actually found a church home before I found a house home when I was moving down here. And so my first experience started out with driving up and down 1960, and as I was driving by on my way to some work appointment someplace, I drove by and I saw on the sign that there was a website. Well, okay, I'm Presbyterian, I was raised Presbyterian. Obviously that was my first stop, was to try and find a Presbyterian church. So I saw the website, finished up with my work appointment, got back to the hotel room that I was living in at the time, jumped online, looked at the website, and despite that, I came here on Sunday. We've done a lot of progress on our website. We have a lot more room we could do for improvement, but it's an ongoing process, and I want people to know that even a bad website can sometimes be a good tool. It can let people know about the church. And so I had decided that afternoon, as I was looking at the website, that I was going to come to the contemporary service, the Journey service. And I had been interested in contemporary services for a while, and so I thought I would check that out. And then the other piece of it is my mom and dad were absolute advocates for Sunday school, no matter how old you are. And so that was the other thing I was going to look for. So I decided that I was going to come on Sunday morning. During the 9:30 hour, I was going to go check out the adult classes, then I was going to go over to the contemporary service. So I came in on Sunday morning, and I followed the crowd, and I ended up parking out here on the side over by the chapel. Got out of my car, walked into the door. My first experience is I walked inside the building, and there was a greeter stationed right there at the front door. And that greeter was busy talking to a friend and did nothing to even acknowledge that I was there.
Can you give us his name?
I couldn't tell you who it is if I knew. And so I wandered by. That wasn't a big deal. But I was looking for some kind of sign or something to tell me where the Sunday school classes were. And at the time in particular, we had no signage up in the sanctuary at all. And so I wandered aimlessly, not really sure where to go for a while. And pretty soon the little cattle call went off and everybody started making their way into the sanctuary. And I got caught up in the crowd and just went into the sanctuary. So I went to the 9:30 service whether I meant to or not. Got to the 9:30 service, went through, and my experience as far as the welcoming of Northwoods was during the passing of the peace, I had two people shake my hand and give the standard line. After the service, I left. I walked by, I think it was Paul that I may have walked by, I'm not sure. But I'm not one that has to be greeted by the preacher on my way in or out. Ministers have a lot of things to do on Sunday morning. I don't necessarily feel like coming in and greeting me for the first moment is something that should be high on their priority necessarily. So it didn't bother me that I wasn't greeted, but I wandered out. I kind of wandered through the narthex there for a few minutes, trying to figure out where was this contemporary service, because I knew at this point I had missed Sunday school. And so eventually I ended up in this building, and I got started on the racetrack the wrong direction, but eventually I ended up down here at the Journey service. Well, by the time I got here, I had a fairly negative experience. I didn't really feel like this was the place for me. Then I went into the Journey service, and within 2 minutes of sitting down, Seth, who was our worship leader at the time in there, made a point of coming over and talking to me. Now, this is somebody who was busy, obviously, trying to get a service ready. They had just gotten done practicing with the band, making sure all the sound checks were all done, had other things to do, and despite all of that, he came over and took the time to talk to me. But more importantly, right after he went wandering off to go do the next thing that he had to do that night, or that morning, Norma DeJong spoke to me. She was sitting right behind me, and we chatted for a while. And not only did she chat with me, she called two other people over and introduced me to them as well. That was the moment that I decided I was coming to Northwoods. So my goal is to duplicate that experience for everybody who walks in the doors at Northwoods. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing that in every service. So, having said that long introduction, as we started taking a look at the greeter and usher training, one of the things that we decided to tie in is looking at a new program that Paul wants to start called the Ambassador Program. Do you want to talk about that at all? Do you want me to just kind of
go for it?
Go in, all right. So one of the things that Paul envisions is ultimately we're all ambassadors. We're ambassadors for Northwoods. We're ambassadors for the Presbyterian Church. We're ambassadors for Christ. And so he is wanting to make this a more active, a proactive type of a role here at Northwoods, is to think of ourselves as ambassadors. Well, that fits very nicely in my opinion, with greeters and ushers. Because in most cases, those are the first people that a new visitor comes across as they come into Northwoods on Sunday morning. So, something else about me. Those of you who know me, and I think you probably all do at least to a certain extent, know that I'm a Disney fan. I'm a big Disney fan to the extent of I spend way too much money and go to Disney World at least once a year. This year I'm going 3 times. But I like Disney World. And one of the reasons that I like Disney World is because of how welcome I feel when I go. About 10 years ago, I bought into their vacation club program, their timeshare. It's called Disney Vacation Club. And at the Disney Vacation Club, one of the things that I like about it is the way they make me feel when I arrive. When I get to Florida and I drive to my hotel, as I get to the gate, the first thing I see is a sign that tells me welcome home. When I get to the guard tower and they check to make sure that I really am staying there, the first thing they say when they come out of the little guard tower, before they say anything else, is welcome home. Now can I have your ID and all of that. Then I will drive on up to drop off my luggage, and there's somebody standing there to open up my door, and they say welcome home. And I walk in the front door, and they say welcome home. All of this before I even get a chance to check in, I get welcomed home. Now, home is a powerful idea. Home is such a powerful idea. We're actually incorporating it into this new year, the theme of our, what do we call it?
Strategic plan.
Strategic plan. So you remember RAMP? Home is going to be our new theme. Well, when we start talking about all of these different confluences of all of these different ideas around home, it really does get us thinking about how we handle the greeter program here at Northwoods. And so I wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about this idea of home. So as we think about what makes a home, most of us think about where we live, our house or apartment. We spend 50% or more of our time at a home. It's the place where we go to relax. It's the place where we go when we want to spend time with friends and family. Sometimes it's the nice quiet place when we just need some areas to reflect and be ourselves. But beyond that, outside of this home, we have another place where we spend a lot of time. Those people would not consider their workplace a home. And yet, most people who work, I think, can name at least 2 or 3 people that they would consider friends. And they consider them close enough friends that they share part of their lives with them. If they're going through a struggle or they've got great news, there's always that 1 or 2 or 3 people there at work that they want to tell them and share that news with. And so it makes it kind of a home environment. Then there's a third place. Now this third place is a little bit less formal, but it's a place that we go outside of these 2 spots, where we want to make ourselves feel at home. Now this is a place where everybody knows our name, and they're always glad you came. And well, not that one, but there is another place that we have this as well, and that's our church. It is the idea that when we go to this place, that we feel like we've gone home. So ultimately, what we're trying to accomplish is we want to think about the church as our third place. That place where we go to be able to feel welcomed among our family, among our friends, among the people who we care about, who just want to be a part of our lives. So as we think about home, and we think about our duties at church, one of the things I want to kind of point out is the fact that we all look at the bulletin on a fairly regular basis that has this message on here. It's our mission statement. And when I first started coming, I questioned some of these things. I said, okay, Christ disciples celebrating God's grace, creating community, making a difference. But how are we making a difference? Well, in my mind, the ambassador program, the greeters and ushers here at Northwoods, this is exactly how we're making a difference. We are creating the community that belongs here at Northwoods. So when I talk about service, a few years ago, Holiday Inn had a job fair. They had 500 jobs that they were looking to fill. At their job fair, they had 5,000 applicants. And so they decided as a management team that as they did their first round of interviews, they were going to make it very quick. They were going to give all those 5,000 people, they were going to give them 30 seconds. And so they went and they talked to everybody, and they had the person introduce themselves. They had them tell why, in 30 seconds, why do you want to work for Holiday Inn? Now their qualification of who moved to the second round of the interview was very simple. Everybody who smiled got a second interview. That was their only qualification at that point. So if we've got a scenario where a hotel chain is focused on making sure that their people are smiling, it's pretty powerful. It tells how important that one expression is. Disney is known for their hospitality. They are known for how well they welcome people home. I want to throw a suggestion out here. The church is a business. It's not something we want to think about as a business necessarily, but we are. We're a business whose business is to help save lives. We want to rescue souls. We want to bring people closer to God. We are in a service industry. And the service that we are providing is bringing people closer to God. Before I go any further, let me stop there. Are there any questions or comments that anybody would like to make? Nothing? Okay, let me rephrase that question then. All of you have been doing the greeting and ushering for several years. What are the things that you think that Northwoods does? Tell me the good, the bad, and the ugly. What do we do well? What do we do not so well? And what do we do, or what don't we do that you think would be a nice addition if we could add it in? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Are you talking about hospitality, or are you talking in general?
In general. In general, here at
Outreach
Northwoods.
to the community.
Okay. I assume that's in the good column.
Yes.
That's where I would put
Why
it.
I came here.
That's where I would put it. Any other thoughts? Okay. So, I think you're right. I think that that's one of the strengths that this church has. I don't think that there is anybody who comes and looks at our bulletin, looks at our newsletter, looks at our annual budget, that would deny the fact that we are very community and mission focused. It is definitely a strength of this church, and I'm going to go into that a little bit later about talking about how that is a strength that we really need to capitalize on. But as we go in and we talk about these first-time visitors, well, Lifeway Research is a national research lab that does a lot of studies on why people do things related to the church. And this was a survey that they did about 8 years ago about some of the top reasons of why people start attending church. Now, most of the people that they spoke with were people who went to church at some point, fell away, and came back. But these were the most common reasons that they were given as for why they returned to the church. Now, the one that really jumps out to me personally is this one right here. 31% of the people said that they wanted to make new friends. I've done a lot of work with church revitalization. It's kind of I don't know why, but it's something that I really like to do. It's something I'm very interested in. And one of the people that I really like who's involved in the church revitalization movement his name is Paul Borden. He's in one of the many Baptist denominations. And Paul Borden has a quote that I love. He has several quotes that I love. The one that I really like here is that he talks about how nobody goes to church because it's friendly. They go to church because they want to make friends. It kind of ties to another quote that he has. There is no, actually let me back up and give another statistic here for you that ties in with this same thought. As I was updating my slide deck for this presentation, I went on to Google and I did a search, very simple search. Friendly Church Houston. And those 3 words in a category came back with 274,000 responses. Leads me to my second quote from Paul Borden. I have never been to the second friendliest church in town. Everybody identifies themselves as being friendly. But there is a difference between being friendly and helping people make friends, helping them make connections. And that's where I think that we're so vital, is helping people make those connections and moving on to that next level of not just coming to church because it's friendly. Now, having said that, many people move from the first-time visitor phase to the second-time visitor phase because of the friendliness of the people. So as somebody decides what they want to look at, these are the 5 top reasons of what people look for when they want to come in and find a new church. They want to come make friends, they want to be closer to God, whatever reason they had for their previous one. Goes into a little bit more depth of why they would want to come back. So they're going to look at the facilities. Is it clean? Is it well manicured? The garden's well manicured? Can they find the restroom? Little things like that. And then when they meet the people, and I have that with my big asterisk right there because that's us. That's the greeter part in particular. But they also look at the programs. They want to see, what is this church doing? They want to decide if this church is serving others or if they're just serving themselves. And ultimately they want to discover, is this church going to help them get closer to God? So going back to the point that you made about how community or focused we are. That is a huge step here, because that is one of those deciding points of, are we just looking inside at ourselves? Are we so focused on keeping our doors open that we forget that the world is our congregation? So this is an important piece to somebody. Now this statistic I found just amazing. Research shows that within the first 10 to 12 minutes from the time somebody gets out of their car, that first 10 to 12 minutes, or the last 10 to 12 minutes from the time until they get to their car is when most people decide whether or not they're going to come back. You want to know what's not included in the first 10 to 12 minutes or the last 10 to 12 minutes?
Choir.
People that will influence their decision. If it's what's going to influence their decision is if it's a terrible sermon, not if, it was a good sermon or a great sermon or what really helps them make up their mind is the people that they meet. Again, thinking about the things of what are they looking for? They're wanting to make friends. They're wanting to find people of similar values. Those are the things that they're finding out in that first 10 to 12 minutes and the last 10 to 12 minutes. And this last 10 to 12 minutes is going to be important. I'll bring it up later. So again, more interesting statistics of if a person comes just one time, there's only a 10% chance that they're actually going to become active. If we can get them to make that second time visit, that jumps to 25%. 45% if they come a third time. But here is the challenge. Probably the biggest challenge in my mind of getting visitors to come and stay once they've come. Most people who come to church for the first time come in right before service starts, or maybe even a few minutes after the service has started. They sneak in, they sit on the back pew, or they try to. They can't in the Presbyterian church because we claim all of those pews. But they sit as far to the back as they can, and they try desperately not to be noticed. So our challenge is, if we're wanting to welcome these people, and we want them to come again, and we know that we need to get them to come 2 or 3 times before they're going to become actual active members or even active visitors to our church, how do we identify that when they don't even want us to know that they're visitors? Again, I think that we're the answer. The greeters and the ushers are the people who are going to recognize them as they come in and decide whether or not they're going to be willing to come back and try us out that second time. So I put in some ideas of how do you recognize a visitor. And some of them are obvious. You know, I always look for those people who have that deer in the headlights look on their face whenever they come in, and it's very clear that they have no idea where they're going. They're probably a visitor. But some of these are a little bit more subtle. But these are some fairly obvious ways that we can tell if somebody is a visitor and tell if they're there for the first time. And in some cases even, if it's their first time going to the Journey service, even though they've been attending 815 for years. So those are some things to keep in mind. One of the challenges that I hear from people, though, is how do you greet those people without getting embarrassed? I'll use that example again. They're checking out the Journey service for the first time after coming from the 8:15 for years. And most of us get horribly embarrassed when we go up to somebody and say, "Hi, my name is Daniel. I don't think I've ever met you before." Really? Because I've been coming for 20 years. We got to get over that. This is a big church. There are 3 services. There are probably only a couple of dozen people, excluding some staff, that would be able to identify somebody from the 8:15 service or from the 11 o'clock service. Paula Walding made a comment the other day at our training on Sunday that she identifies herself because her thought is often, even if you've seen me before, that doesn't mean that you know my name. Or if you're like me, I am terrible at remembering people's names. And so you may have to introduce yourselves to me. I've met all of you a dozen times at least before I learned your name. I hate to admit that, but I'm terrible at remembering names. And so that's a great way of it's a non-intrusive, I know I've met you before. Could you tell me your name again? I'm Daniel. Which also saves them the embarrassment of remembering yours. So there are people who will tell you that anybody can greet. I will respectfully disagree with that statement. I'm in sales, and I will tell you that there are people that are wonderful people who I don't want to let anywhere near my customers. The same thing I think is true with greeting and ushering. Now, there are skills that people are born with. There are absolutely skills that we can learn. But even with that, there are some personalities that it would be unfair to put them into a situation where we're asking them to be our first line representation of Northwoods. The good news is, I think all of us are of the personality that we are good greeters, and we've learned those skills, whether or not you have the talent naturally or not. So I went through and there are 5 kind of broad categories that I feel are vital gifts. And again, gifts can be learned in this case, but I think that these are some vital steps in making a good greeter. First thing is obviously inclusive. Welcome everyone. We have a lot of people who you don't necessarily want to be too close to. We live in a world that is very divisive. You know, I've spent the last 2 weeks watching the various national conventions. We're not a very inclusive world right now. And what better place to be inclusive than our home? Warm, helpful. I think that these are all pretty basic understandings. I'm going to dive into more specific skills that I think that fall under these categories, but I did want to kind of put these up for you to think about as we look at this. This is one of my favorite scriptures. And I think that it ties in with exactly what we're trying to accomplish. So, what are the duties that we have for the ambassadors? The first is to be present. Again, like I said, this is kind of a further breakdown of these. First is to be present. Now, it's very, there's 2 stages to this. Stage 1 is actually be there. Physically show up when you are set to be the greeter or the usher for that Sunday. And if you can't be there physically, help us out and help us find somebody who can cover for you. I'll throw out something else here of we all have bad days. There are days that I am not in a spiritual place where I can be a warm and welcoming person. I think it's important that we acknowledge the fact that all of us have days like that, and then recognize the fact that that makes us a terrible first impression. On those days, I want to stand up here and say, you have permission to take a day off if you're having a day like that. But I would ask that you help out Alice so that she doesn't have to freak out right at the moment of trying to find a substitute. Just call one of the other people on the list. See if they can substitute for you that day. Just trade off.
We don't have a list.
We're working on a list.
Okay.
It's being developed.
I will get you a list.
Okay.
So. But the second part of being present is being there mentally as well. You know, I can stand at the door, but that doesn't mean that I'm a good greeter. You have to actually make a point of paying attention to what's going on around you, which actually leads me to the second point of be attentive. Part of being attentive is not only looking for that visitor, watching for those signs, see if they brought their Bible, see if they have their name tag, but also looking for people who need more than just a good morning and welcome to Northwoods. Part of being an ambassador, and this is where I really like taking it outside of being a greeter and outside of being an usher and thinking of ourselves as ambassadors. Part of being an ambassador is seeing when somebody needs something more than a handshake. Now, I'm going to go into our long-term plans here of what we want to do, but one of the pieces of our ongoing project is, as many greeters as we have today, as many ushers as we have signed up today, we really need to double that. And then when we've doubled that and Alice is starting to feel really comfortable with that number, I'm going to ask her that she really needs to double that again. And part of that is making sure we have substitutes when they're needed, but part of it is having people out there who will help to be attentive. So that when you feel the need to stop and talk to somebody, which leads me into my next piece, greeting everyone. Sometimes when we're focused on greeting everyone, we see somebody who needs more attention, get some help. Call somebody else over to help you out. Take your spot at the door and spend time with that person when they need it. A story about greeting everyone. I have a friend who several years ago started going to a new church. He went with his wife and his daughter for the first time. I don't even remember what denomination it was, but he attended this church for the first time. And the thing that struck him the most is when he walked in the door, before the greeter welcomed him or his wife, the greeter welcomed his daughter. And he said that was something that he had seen in that church that he had never seen in any other church before. That they considered everyone part of the family and greeted everyone on an equal level. And he said that was the decision. It was in that first 10 to 12 minutes that he decided that he was going to go to that church, because they made a point of not just greeting them, but also greeting their child. Listen. Again, going back to be attentive. There's times that we need more than just a handshake. And we need to be aware of that. And again, I will stand up here and with all of the authority that has been given to me, which is not much, I will tell you that if you see somebody who needs to talk, greeting somebody else, greeting all of the members as they walk in the front door becomes secondary. We're home. We're a family. And part of being a family means we understand when somebody is hurting. We understand when they just need somebody to talk to. And so I give you permission to call somebody else over to take your place greeting at the door, for you to be able to go off and listen to that person if that's what they need. Alternately, call one of the staff members, call one of the pastors over. Notice the visitor. I mean, this is a pretty obvious one. I think we've spent a lot of time talking about this one already. But the other thing I want you to do is think about the visitor every Sunday. So this is where it goes back to being an ambassador versus just being a greeter. When I came on my very first Sunday, and Seth came over to me and was very friendly and welcomed me to the church, found out a little bit about me, I liked that. That was impressive to me. What was more impressive to me was when somebody who wasn't paid to be nice to me was nice to me. And so I think that it's important for us to really think about the visitor every Sunday. If you're not standing at the door, if you're not being the greeter that day, or if you're not standing at the inside doors for the sanctuary and being the usher for the day, and you're just in your pew and you see somebody that you don't recognize, I want you to remember that ultimately you're an ambassador now. And part of that is, even when you're not working, you are always an ambassador. And so I want you to make sure that you do recognize the visitor and think about them every Sunday. Then the final point that I want to put in here is greet again. We talked about that first 10 to 12 minutes. Now we're talking about that last 10 to 12 minutes. How powerful would it be if you were a visitor for the first time and you snuck in right as the service was starting, and then you sneak out, and as you're leaving, somebody still catches you and greets you? Or maybe even more powerful, you greeted them on the way in, you welcomed them as a first-time visitor, and then as they're getting ready to leave, you say hello to them again, ask them what they thought of the service, invite them to join you for a cup of coffee. So as we create our plan, I put together this slide just to show you all of the different points where people can come into this church. It's amazing how many outside doors we have. And to your point, so much of the time we get people who are parking over here for a service that's over here. So here we go back to my dream again, of doubling the number of greeters we have and then doubling it again. I would like, at some point in the near future, for us to get to the point where we have enough greeters that we not only have 2 greeters at every door, so 1, 2, 3, but we also have greeters who are in the courtyard, who will welcome people who are driving up in the driveway. People who will be down here at the end of the sidewalk. So when people do park on this far end, that we have them to be able to show them where that service is, or where they might find childcare. I want to be able to have roaming greeters that are hanging out around the narthex, so that they're available when you see somebody who needs to just talk for a while and you need to be a good listener. You can call one of these rovers over to take your spot. Or you can call the rover over to say, I'd like to introduce you to this new family. They're here for the first time. They need help taking their child over to daycare. Would you mind walking them over? Because how many of us prefer to be walked someplace rather than pointed to where we're supposed to go? Half the time, if somebody tells me, yeah, you just go down that aisle and you hang a right, and then when you get to the end of the hallway, you turn a left. Now, don't turn right, turn left. And then if you go down that hallway, I'm lost at the first intersection. Whereas if we have somebody who's available to walk them to wherever they need to go, to wherever the childcare is, to wherever the journey service is, it creates that much more powerful of an experience.
You get those few minutes to connect with them.
And you get those few minutes to make that connection. Which actually, I'm going to use that as a kind of a segue to talk about the Ambassador Training 2.0, which will happen probably sometime before we start Lent. I'm going to go back to Paul Borden. Paul Borden, my favorite church revitalization expert, says that we're all Legos. Now, everybody remember Legos? Got these little building blocks that have different number of little circles on them. Maybe some of them are 2, some are 4, some of them are 12. Well, he talks about the fact that we're all Legos. And those little connectors are the number of people that we're genuinely friends with. We may know a lot of people. We may be connected to this person, through this person, through this person, through this person, but we're really close and friends with just a limited number of people. So here is what we want to ask you to do. These are Paul Borden's words, not mine, although I'll be glad to steal them. If you need to, at the beginning of the month, I want you to call up your closest friend you have here at church, and I want you to explain to them that you can't be their friend anymore, or at least not for the next few weeks. Because if we're so interested in making sure when they walk in to talk to them and find out how their week is going and how are the kids and, oh, I know you had surgery last week, how did that go? Well, I know that let them go on in. That frees that connector up for you to make friends with somebody new. And that's not to say that you're going to become friends with that next person who walks in the door. But I want you to be open enough to recognize the fact that you could be their friend. Or, better yet, you are open enough to listen to their interests, to find out more about them, so that you can connect them with somebody else's leg up. We're not here because the church is friendly. We're here because we want to make friends. We all want to be part of this family. We all want to be welcomed home. And the place that we call home is the place where we're surrounded by our family. We're surrounded by our friends. They're the people that we share our lives with. We have an opportunity through the Ambassador Program to be the introduction to the family. So that's what I really kind of want us to think about as we start this program is, to every visitor, instead of saying, good morning, thanks for coming, welcome home, because this could be their new home. So